Hi everyone, I'm back. Told you I'd be back. Rachael Clarke here, and I would love to read the first 2 chapters of my book, The Big Old Bike, with you on this wonderful day, the launch day of The Big Old Bike. So I'm going to dive right in. Let's start with chapter 1. And I'll show you the pictures as I'm going along too, because that's just fun. Why, you might as well see the pictures, right? So we'll start with party time. Chapter 1. Oliver lived in a cozy little house on a quiet street in a small town called Little Springs. He had a short, shaggy-haired dog named Tiny, who loved to cuddle. He also loved to bark like a pit bull, but hid in the hallway whenever the mailman came by. Everything about Oliver's life seemed small. His hat, his footprint, his bike. He wore small, round glasses to see better, which made the kids at school call him Bug Eyes. If that nickname wasn't bad enough, Oliver also got teased for being short and skinny for his age. He dreamed of riding big, beautiful thoroughbreds in the fanciest horse races someday, like the Kentucky Derby. Sometimes when he rode his bike around the neighborhood, Oliver liked to pretend he was galloping around a racetrack instead. Sitting on the back of a mighty steed, he'd rush toward the finish line, which was usually just a crack in the cement or a long shadow across the street. His dad said that horse riders, called jockeys, always needed to be small people, short and light. It was the perfect job for Oliver. You have such an overactive imagination, his mom would always say. She'd ruffle his hair, and Oliver would just smile. He didn't mind that fact at all. Imagining things was fun. There's Oliver riding the horse. One thing he really didn't like, though, was his bike. Oliver was small, but his bike was even smaller. He'd grown out of it last year already, and now he looked huge sitting on top of it. Normally, Oliver would love that, since he didn't look huge very often. But this wasn't one of those times. The kids at school had started to tease him because he looked so silly. Plus, his knees kept hitting the handlebars, leaving purple bruises behind. He needed a new bike badly, but his parents said they couldn't afford one right now. So instead of letting himself get sad, Oliver grew determined. If his parents didn't have enough money, then he'd help them pay for it. He decided to save all of his weekly allowance in a special jar he'd marked bike. And for extra good luck, each night before he drifted off to sleep, Oliver searched for the brightest star in the sky to wish upon. He'd squeeze his eyes shut, asking for a new bike. Oliver hoped with all his might that someday his wish would come true. 2 weeks later, it was Oliver's birthday. A few friends and family came over for a celebration in the afternoon. It was a warm day for mid-June. Oliver's dad set up a slip and slide with sprinklers for everyone to run through. He got totally soaked. After devouring a table full of snacks, his parents revealed a birthday cake with 11 candles. It even had his name on it. Oliver's mom made it special just for him. "Happy birthday to you," everyone sang with big smiles. The flames went out with one blow. The cake tasted delicious, but the best part was the red and yellow icing, just like his favorite superhero, the Flash. Nobody was quicker than the Flash, and Oliver loved anything that went fast. When the cake was done, he opened gifts. Oliver got new socks and underwear from Mom and Dad like he did every year. Grown. A pair of sweet kicks and a few other awesome toys. His best friend Austin gave him a Nerf blaster gun, which he'd been wanting forever. "Thank you," he said to Austin, and to everybody who gave him a present. His smile was so huge it hurt his cheeks. Oliver spent the rest of the afternoon running through sprinklers and firing his new Nerf gun. He couldn't have asked for a better birthday. Oliver felt super tired once all the excitement was over. His friends had all gone home, and it was suddenly very quiet in the house. Grandma decided to stay for supper, but she was busy helping Mom in the kitchen. Dad was nowhere to be seen, so Oliver flopped onto the couch. A little nap before supper couldn't hurt. His dog Tiny jumped up into his lap to cuddle, but before they could snuggle in and get too comfy, Oliver's parents popped back into the room. "Oh, no you don't," his dad said, swooping toward the couch. "No napping yet. We have one more birthday surprise." He pulled Oliver to his feet, leading him to the back door. Now on to chapter 2. The gift. "Now close your eyes," his mom said. Oliver followed her directions and closed them. Excited, he even covered them with his hands just to be sure. There was a loud creak and the back door opened. His parents led him through. Oliver stepped outside onto the deck and waited. He could hear his mom and grandma whispering excitedly from somewhere behind. His dad said, "Okay, open them." Oliver threw his hands away from his face and saw it immediately, straight ahead. He stood staring. His mouth hung open in shock, eyes rounder than buttons. Parked right there in the yard was a magnificent red bike. A shiny blue bow was tied to the black leather seat. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. It had a metal rack over the back tire and a headlight perched on the front. The bike's frame wasn't all sharp edges like most of the ones other kids rode. No, this frame was very smooth and rounded. Curved chromed handlebars, similar to a motorcycle's, gleamed in the sunshine. In fact, the whole bike reminded Oliver of a motorcycle. A really skinny one, anyway. There's the bike. There was no way to describe his excitement. Looking at that bike was like seeing all the Christmas gifts he'd ever received wrapped into one. Grinning proudly at the surprise that they'd pulled off, his parents stood beside the bicycle. Dad chimed the little bell on the handlebars. Mom patted the saddle-like seat. "Come check it out," they invited. Oliver unfroze himself and closed his mouth. He raced to the bike, eagerly inspecting every angle of it. It was a deep red shade, like the color of cherry popsicles. It wasn't overly shiny, and it had touches of rust on the pedals, rims, and mudguards. But Oliver didn't care, because it was big, really big. Could he be dreaming? Oliver looked at his parents, unsure if he should believe that this was real. The huge smiles on their faces confirmed that it was true. His grandma watched quietly from the deck with twinkling eyes. "Happy birthday," they all said happily. "This was your grandpa's bike when he was young," Oliver's dad explained. "He gave it to us shortly before he passed away, hoping you'd ride it someday. Your grandma wanted to be here when we gave it to you." He took something out of his pocket and showed it to Oliver. It was an old, faded photo of Grandpa Newton posed beside this very same bike. "Your grandpa would have been very proud of you to see you today," his grandma said, walking over to give Oliver a squeeze. "He rode that bike the day we first met and fell in love. Did you know that?" "Oh, wow! So it's really old then, huh?" Oliver said in awe. His grandma chuckled, squeezing his cheeks. "Old enough," she said. "Thank you so much," Oliver beamed with pure joy, giving hugs all around. His wish actually came true. He couldn't believe it. And he couldn't help but imagine how fast he'd be able to ride with this big old bike, maybe faster than a racehorse. This was one of the best days ever. Oliver's dad patted his son's shoulder. "Now, I know it's older," he said, "but it's still in great shape. We had your uncle tune it up and store it until you were big enough." "That's okay, Dad. I don't care if it's new or not. I love it," Oliver replied. He swung a leg over the bike, but the seat was too high. He quickly got back off. They lowered it as far as it could go. "Perhaps it's still a little too big for you," his dad said, holding the frame steady. No, it's great," Oliver answered. He swung back onto the bike. His tippy toes barely touched the ground. "I just need to get used to it. All I need is practice. Can I take it for a ride?" He couldn't wait another second to try it out. "Sure you can. Don't forget your helmet, though," his mom reminded. "And just stay on our block for now, okay?" "Okay." Oliver raced into the house to get his helmet, running back faster than the flash. He hopped on again, buckling the strap under his chin. Oliver nudged the kickstand out of the way with his foot, suddenly realizing how heavy this bike was. a lot heavier than he was used to. "I'll be back soon." Oliver gave a cheery wave. He pushed off to get the bike rolling. It wobbled back and forth, quickly forcing him to plant a foot back on the ground. Sticking his tongue out, he focused. Oliver pushed off again, harder this time. He jammed his feet down on both pedals. The bike still wobbled, but stayed upright. Slowly, Oliver built up speed and made it out of the gate. Then out onto the street. He hooted as cheers from his family floated in the air behind him. Wind brushed against his cheeks as he rode. The late afternoon sun heated his skin. He smiled because his knees weren't hitting the handlebars. It felt very different to be so high off the ground, and he wasn't used to steering such large wheels. If he slowed down too much or turned the bike too sharply, it wobbled. Nerves fluttered around inside his belly like angry dragonflies, but he fought the annoying insects, refusing to let them take over. "This is only my first ride. I just need more practice," he whispered to himself. Oliver rode around the block a few more times. The tires wobbled as he made the final turn to head home, but less than when he'd started. When he was back in the yard, he hit the brakes and the heavy bike tipped. Oliver's foot slipped on the grass. Both he and the bike fell over, landing with a thunk. He quickly stumbled back to his feet. Looking around, he hoped nobody saw. Not exactly the smoothest way to end the ride, but that didn't stop the smile from beaming on his face. Oliver had just ridden his new bike. He couldn't wait to do it again tomorrow. And there's Oliver. So that's chapters 1 and 2. I hope that you enjoyed it, and consider picking up a copy.